be honest here. If Jordan in his prime, Jordan in the early 90s, is averaging...
Today's rules.
Yeah, today's rules is averaging 40.
He would average 40.
Okay.
I think he would average 40.
How would Jordan do, and how many points do you believe he would average?
I don't think anybody's averaging 60 or 70.
Okay.
So those days are over with.
Nobody's gonna get Wilt 50 a game, huh?
Not 50 a game. No, that's not going to happen. But I will say this, Michael Jordan would average whatever he want to average.
If Michael played in this era, he'll average 50. He averaged 50 points. I don't know why you guys discuss the GOAT. Why you discuss the GOAT?
I agree.
Many old heads who watched Michael Jordan play always make these claims. They say if he played today, he would dominate the league, average 50 and so on. Is it because they don't like the current era and its players, or is it actually their honest opinion founded by what they saw from Jordan when they played against him? Let's find out if their claims are true or false, and how many points a prime Michael Jordan would average in today's NBA. First, let's establish that Michael Jordan is the greatest scorer ever, period. He has the highest career points per game average at 30.1, the highest playoff per game average at 33.4, the most scoring titles with 10, and perhaps most shockingly, Jordan did all of this scoring in an era where less points were available. In the 1997-98 season, his last season with the Bulls, he averaged 28.7 points per game, when teams were only averaging 95.6 points a night. Compare this to the 2024 season, where the worst offense in the NBA is the Memphis Grizzlies, but even they averaged 10 more points than the 90s at 105 points per game. Not only are points per game through the roof, but the number of field goals attempted is up too. In 1998, teams were only attempting 78.2 shots per game compared to 88.9 in today's game. But it wasn't always like this. This is a shot chart of field goals attempted in every season throughout NBA history. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, the game was in its infancy as teams were experimenting in how to play the game. This dramatic dip in production from the 1950 to 1953 seasons was one of these experiments, which resulted in the introduction of the shot clock, as teams would get a substantial lead and then just hold the ball so the other team couldn't score. In the shot clock's first season, it instantly brought the attempts per game from 75 up to 86, speeding up the game. But then we have this. For 24 straight seasons, teams were attempting at least 90 field goal attempts a game, and it even got as high as 109 in the 1961 NBA season, which allowed for stat lines like this, and averages like this. But it began to slow down in the 70s, and this trend continued in the 1980s, until a significant surge occurred in the 1986 season, which was right in the middle of the Showtime Lakers dynasty. Up until this point in NBA history, the game was based around the fast break, giving teams more possessions. But then the 90s, where everything slowed down, as big men such as Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, and Patrick Ewing were reaching their primes, as teams opted to feed their bigs in the post more frequently, which resulted in an increased number of half-court sets with less possessions to go around. But despite this, Michael Jordan still averaged over 30 points a game 7 times in his career, reaching as high as 37 points a game in the 1987 season. 5 of these 30-point seasons came in the 80s, but over the entire decade, Karl Malone was the only other player to average above 30, which he did in the 1990 season. That's only 2 players in a decade, while this season alone, 3 players averaged over 30. The amount of shot attempts in a game will probably never recover to the level of the 1960s, but the scoring has gone up nonetheless. What also made his numbers even more impressive was the defense that was allowed in the 80s and 90s. First, hand checking wasn't called a foul like it is in today's game, and instead you were allowed to place your hand on a player that you were guarding at all times. You could basically steer an offensive player to wherever you know they aren't good at shooting, unlike in today's game where you are practically at the offensive player's mercy. Also, the 3-second violation wasn't introduced until 2001, which meant bigs could camp out under the basket for entire games. With the paint always filled because centers weren't shooting threes, there was always a big in the paint. This makes his numbers even more incredible, as we know Jordan because of his high-flying dunks. Because of MJ's relentlessness when it came to driving the basketball, I believe he would average more free throw attempts per game, with the softer rules, as bigs would have to try and rotate to block him. Jordan averaged 6.8 free throws per game for his career, but if he played today, those numbers would likely increase to somewhere between 8 to 12 a game. And when you take into consideration that MJ shot 83% from the line, he would already have an extra 5 points to his average. Many fans disagree with the NBA grades who believe that Jordan would average 50 today. They argue due to his poor 3-point shooting, and notably his perceived weakness in driving left, that he would likely score fewer points today. I'll show you just how truthful these statements really are, but first let's establish something. Michael Jordan could definitely go left. Now Now we have that out of the way, let me show you why Jordan would adapt to the current era of three-point shooting. Sure, when Michael Jordan came into the league, he was a horrendous three-point shooter, making as low as 13% in 1987. However, in the 1995 season, he shot 50% from deep, but that was during the 2 seasons where the NBA moved the three-point line closer. But even with a normal three-point line in 1993, he shot 35% from deep, which would put him at league average today. Even in the 90s though, Jordan could have been a better three-point shooter if he really wanted to, and actually he had a reason why he chose not to shoot threes.
Shooting is something that I don't want to excel at because it takes away from all phases of my game. My game is a fake drive to the hole, penetrate, dish off, dunk or whatever. And when you have that mentality, as I found out in the first game, of making threes, you don't go to the hole as much. You go to the three-point line and you start sitting there waiting for someone to find you. And that's not my mentality. And I don't want to create that because it takes away from my other parts of my game.
In today's game though, he would have to shoot threes to stay in a team's offensive scheme, and I believe that with more time to practice the three-point shot, MJ would shoot an above average percentage if he played today. But something many people do not realize is with more space to operate and the lack of post-ups in the current NBA, he would dominate even more than he did in the 90s. With guard defenders not being used to guarding in the post, and just overall more space to create a shot, he would likely shoot near 60% on his fadeaways, scoring around 20 points a game just from mid-range shots. Phil Jackson once explained the difference between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. He said Kobe was more likely to assert himself and take over a game offensively, while Jordan would do all of his scoring within the flow of the offense. Because of this, I believe that Michael Jordan wouldn't average 50, but instead somewhere between 35 to 45 points a game, still comfortably leading the league in scoring. Before you say this is crazy, remember what I said earlier about the difference between points per game today versus in the 90s. With more possessions comes more opportunities to score the basketball.